Providing feedback, again, another very crucial part of working with mentees. You want to give feedback promptly. Sometimes a good idea to ask for feedback from the mentee first. How do they think the class went? How did they do with the area of focus? What student learning took place? What student learning didn't take place? Be clear about what you'll be observing before you do the observation and how it's tied to their improvement goals. Agree on a feedback format based on the type of observation. How do they want to get that feedback? Provide concrete next steps and make sure feedback is bite-sized and can be readily implemented in the next class. And follow up quickly with a reflective discussion of the observation, especially being sure to listen to how the teacher felt it went and where they say they need improvement so that you can work on that next step, which is planning for the next class. These are just some very basics about providing feedback. You want to focus on the observation and not inference what did you see and not what you thought. Focus on behavior and not the individual. It's more about how they behaved in the classroom, how they implemented their lesson plan. So the constructive feedback should be about what the teacher did rather than personality or style. Focus on things that can be changed. Constructive feedback should be about instructional practices a teacher can change and improve rather than something that is out of his or her control. The sound of their voice, how they move physically about the classroom, and provide recommendations and work together on finding solutions. Constructive feedback should include specific recommendations and a path forward to finding solutions. You want to leave them feeling like they have someplace to go with the information that you gave them. As we said before, you want to be specific. Broad statements that are not actionable do not support improvement. Tie feedback to the previously identified goals that you agreed on with the mentee. Feedback should be focused on goals that they want to achieve and should not contain surprises or gotchas of any kind unless a critical error has been made that needs correction immediately. Use positive language. There is a technique called plussing, which encourages mentees by using and what if at the end of statements to improve an outcome. Gives them a chance to respond to the feedback with their own ideas. Be straightforward. Give honest feedback on agreed upon areas of focus. Do not combine positive feedback with negative to cushion it. These sandwich feedback ideas are often given to folks giving feedback that you want to put a positive, then a negative, followed by a positive. The but negates whatever came before it. So if you say, well, that part of your lesson was good, but this and this and this, you've now negated that this part of the lesson was good. So but negates what went before it, and sandwiching a negative between two positives can lead to distrust of positive statements, that you're just saying that because you have something negative that you need to tell me. So be straightforward. Give the negative feedback as negative feedback. This needs to be improved. This is an area of growth. Those are the ways you would present that information. Set a time. Be professional about your observations and your feedback and follow-up. Be prompt, provide full attention, don't exceed the time frame, and be specific. Use examples from the lesson to provide clarity about your observations. Provide the resources and next steps that are relevant to the specific areas discussed. Give books, articles, videos, podcasts, etc. that support learning in the areas where they need growth. The same with any professional development you can identify to help them in those specific areas. And provide them with information on how to get the instructional coaching that may be available in your school. Schedule time to collaborate on lesson planning to address areas discussed or topics the mentee is concerned about. Recommend other teachers the mentee can observe or co-teach with and facilitate that activity. Introduce them to these other teachers and help them set up that observation or co-teaching. It's very important to avoid over-talking. You want to make sure you're listening more than you're speaking and not saying, this is how I would do this. You might want to instead say, would you like to consider another way to do this, and then have them tell you how they might do it. It's very tempting for mentors to just try and tell mentees how they would operate that class, how they would implement that lesson plan, but it's important that mentees come to these conclusions on their own. Next, we're going to talk about facilitating adult learning and andragogy. The definition of a mentor is an experienced and a trusted advisor, but still, in that capacity, you are trying to educate mentees on how to improve their instructional practice. These 6 principles of adult learning, they go back a long way. They're based on the teachings of Malcolm Knowles and his research, and they talk about all types of adult learning, and mentees, we can't forget, are adults. So they're internally motivated and self-directed. They come to this job wanting to do the best they can. They're going to make choices relevant to their own learning objectives. They're going to develop their learning goals with your guidance, and they should assume responsibility for their own choices. So the more you can let mentees work out how to improve, the better their learning will be. They, of course, bring prior experience and knowledge to the classroom. So you want to encourage them to connect what they've learned in their programs, what they've learned in their clinical experience, with current knowledge and tasks. You will, however, have mentees whose clinical experiences was impacted by COVID-19. They will have had clinical experiences that was still a requirement of these programs, but they will be different. They will have taken place in a remote environment. Draw relevance to their experiences both as students and when they were having those clinical experiences during the COVID-19 closure. Your mentees are going to be goal-oriented. Again, they want to improve. They want to acquire relevant and adequate knowledge. You want to focus on specific intended learning outcomes with them. And once the learning goals have been identified, learning activities should align to those goals. That's how adults feel most in control. They're relevancy-oriented. They benefit by relating the mentoring experience to their own learning goals. And if the activities they are engaged in and the feedback they receive directly contribute to achieving their personal learning objectives, they will be motivated to actively engage and participate in reflective discussions. They need to be engaged just as their students need to be engaged in their learning process. And they're practical. They'll want to convert whatever theory they've learned in pedagogy and in their classes to practical strategies. Classroom teaching requires mentees to apply theoretical concepts learned in their prep programs into real-life situations. This can be very intimidating, and mentors play a role in helping teachers feel more confident in this. Learning is assisted when mentors can support mentees in implementing theoretical knowledge to actual classroom situations. Now it becomes real to them. What they learn does have an application. And of course, all adult learners deserve to be respected. They'll profit from collaborative relationships with their peers, introduce them to people, facilitate their becoming more familiar with people in the school, not just teachers, but all of the other support people in the school and in the district. They'll become more confident when they are considered colleagues by their mentors and peers. So the more you can get them involved in collaborative activities, in teams, that more confident they'll begin to feel. And when their contributions are acknowledged, they begin to feel like respected professionals. It can be bewildering to walk into a meeting that's a collaborative meeting or some kind of team meeting and not know what's going on. So make sure they have enough background on the work of these groups and committees to understand what is going on. Debrief with them after the first time they're attending one of these committee meetings to identify key members and clarify anything that went on that they don't understand, so that they don't feel sort of lost in that new environment. Reflective conversations. Reflective practice sounds like a trendy word. It sounds like something that is new, that gets tossed around a lot. Reflective practice is a skill that takes focus and practice and a good deal of trust between the people having reflective conversations. It does help beginning teachers organize their thoughts and make sense of their classroom events. It can lead to professional forms of inquiry and goal setting. It promotes a model of learning that views teaching as an ongoing process of knowledge building. Mentors can help with that by acknowledging what they're constantly learning in their areas of growth, and it promotes conversation and collaboration with mentors. This is just a reflective teaching practice cycle. It looks similar to the cycle we saw before about classroom observations. So the mentee teaches, they're going to self-assess the effect their teaching has had on student learning. You're going to help them consider new ways of teaching, which can improve the quality of learning. They're going to plan to implement what they've considered and decided to adopt, and develop implementation strategies, and then back to the teaching phase of the cycle. Reflect on your mentoring encounters yourself. Review your thoughts and feelings. How did your mentoring encounter go? How do you know? So modeling that reflective cycle on your own encounters with your mentee will help you work with them on their reflective practice. You should reflect on a lesson you delivered and review the cycle, and maybe sit with your mentee and show how you are implementing reflective practices for that lesson. You can review a videotape of a lesson the mentee delivered. You should avoid having an agenda of things that you want them to understand from that videotape. Let them watch and reflect. Let them identify strengths and aspects of the lesson that could have gone better, areas of growth, and encourage the mentee to strategize on how to capitalize on their strengths and how to improve their areas of weakness. How can they grow in those areas, and how can they grow stronger in their areas of strength? You want to identify a situation that the mentee believes could have been dealt with more effectively. So where did they feel like there could be improvement? Describe the situation as a narrative without judgment, including the outcome. So you've taken notes, you've written down what happened, and that's the teach cycle. So they taught the lesson. Then help them identify thoughts and feelings about the situation and the outcome they achieved. That's the assessment part of the cycle. Review how the experience matched conception and intended outcome. Identify what could change to impact the outcome. That's considering, did it go the way they thought it would or it should, and what could change to impact the outcome they got. That's the consider phase. Develop a plan to implement changes. That's the practice part of the cycle. So how are they going to implement the changes that they themselves developed? And then back to the start of the cycle, they will implement those changes and undergo the same reflective cycle. Having reflective conversations. Probably the most important thing in having a reflective conversation with a mentee is simply to stop talking. It seems like common sense, but it can be difficult. You've got a lot of things going on in your head. You have to stop think talking, which is when you kind of hear what they're saying, but mostly you're thinking about what you're going to say next. So suppress that urge to focus on how you want to respond and focus on listening to what the mentee says and how they're saying it. So approach listening as a learning experience. It is an opportunity to learn about the mentee and how they think and feel, and it is an opportunity to learn something they learned that may be new to you. So the listening part of this conversation is important for both the mentee and the mentor. You want to make sure you've allocated enough time to have an in-depth dialogue. You want to make sure, again and again, we'll say, keep this confidential, since trust is essential in reflective conversations. Listen, resist the urge to take over the conversation. You can share recollections of your early days that are relevant, but be careful not to overwhelm your mentee with too many horror stories, as that can be kind of a negative way to have a conversation. Use the information from observations to generate talking points. Ask the teacher, are you dominating the class? Ask them how they can encourage students to take responsibility for class-wide projects. And again, encourage participation in PLCs, and if you have them, critical friends groups. Active listening also involves guiding the conversation. Avoid close-ended questions and employ open-ended ones, using broad queries to guide mentees to discover solutions for themselves. Some examples of leading questions may be, what other alternatives have you considered to X or to what you are currently doing? How do you envision your student outcomes once you do try a different activity? Give mentees time and opportunity to think. Again, we're uncomfortable with silence. Don't let them off the hook with lofty responses. Pull out actionable items from every conversation. Probe by asking questions like, tell me how you plan to accomplish this, or how did you decide that this was the best choice? Direct, specific questions can help focus the conversation while bringing to light important insights and next steps. And you want to pay attention to more than just words, how the mentee is saying it and what their body is doing while speaking. Often the real message doesn't take the form of a verbal response. It may be less cerebral and more emotional, expressing itself through body language. Use body language as a basis for a question, not an assumption. You seem uncomfortable, or I'm feeling a lot of energy from you, are examples of using body language to deepen conversation, instead of saying things like, you were nervous or you seemed afraid. Summarize and reflect. You want to make sure you understand what it is the mentee is saying. If I'm understanding you correctly, or tell me if this is what you're saying, tell me if this is what you're feeling, to ensure clarity and understanding. Reflect back the emotion to ensure the mentee knows they have been heard. It seems to me you're upset about this. I feel that you have some excitement about this. Are some ways you can reflect their emotions as well as their statements. Relationships between mentors and mentees can get quite close. You can become friends, but you do want to be careful that it maintains a professional aspect when you're in school. You don't want to pry. If the mentee seems upset, you want to just listen, respect any silence, and let them respond in their own time. You want to be aware of your own body language. You want to be leveled. Avoid sitting on the teacher's desk or sitting behind a desk while you're having this conversation with your mentee. Try not to have a desk between you at all. You want to stay on equal peer levels. Review your posture. Make sure your arms are not crossed and that you're sitting upright in an attentive, open position. Be careful of what your face is doing. Help where the mentee wants help, and don't give advice professionally or personally unless you are asked. Use reflective questions instead. This is a very difficult thing for most people, especially teachers who are problem solvers. We want to give advice, but often that's not what the mentee needs at the time unless they ask for it.